Through its campaign of violence from 2014, ISIL perpetrated some of the gravest crimes in recent history. Through killings, abduction, slavery, and the targeting of those most vulnerable, ISIL inflicted unimaginable suffering on the people of Iraq. In response, the international community and the government of Iraq spoke with one voice in calling for the establishment of UNITAD to collect evidence of ISIL crimes and ultimately hold those responsible to account. Since its arrival in Iraq in October 2018, UNITAD rapidly established operational bases in Baghdad, Erbil and Duhok, which host 6 dedicated field investigation units focused on key investigative priorities that address crimes committed by ISIL against all communities. Specialized units addressing gender-based crimes and ISIL financial systems have also been put in place. This has included a dedicated line of investigation into crimes against the Yazidi community in the Sinjar region. UNITAD has worked closely with survivors, religious leaders, community groups, and national authorities to comprehensively document ISIL crimes against the Yazidis. With over 200 team members working in Iraq, UNITAD utilizes innovative technologies as well as traditional models to surface evidence like these ISIL documents, which describe the appropriation of Yazidi assets. Through the construction of a major case brief, a comprehensive narrative has been established in relation to key crimes, including ISIL's massacre of the Yazidi population in the village of Kojo. On June the 10th, ISIL took control of the city of Mosul, and in the days and weeks following, moved through Tal Afar and ultimately consolidated its position in the area surrounding the town of Sinjar, located at the base of the Sinjar Mountains. ISIL also took control of the border crossings with Syria in the westernmost part of the region. Propaganda videos created by ISIL at the time and collected by UNITAD as part of its investigative work show the taking of military equipment and supplies, the complete destruction of border outposts, and the imprisonment and execution of border guards, with Shia and Yazidi personnel particularly targeted. As ISIL occupied the Sinjar region, they targeted and they destroyed a range of cultural sites important to the heritage of Yazidi, Shia, and other religious communities. UNITAD has collected a wide range of information relating to such attacks, including testimonial accounts, battlefield evidence, enhanced open source investigative techniques, and forensic crime scene analysis. These establish a pattern of coordinated violence, not only against the people of the Yazidi and other communities, but also their cultural and religious monuments. In the night of August the 3rd, ISIL launched coordinated attacks on the outlying villages of the region. The first attack came from the south and was launched against Girzerik. This was followed by Sibah Sheikh Khida, then Tal Azir, from which ISIL headed towards Sinjar town. That morning, in Kojo, a number of Yazidi families attempted an escape. While a few families made it to the top of Sinjar mountain, others were captured in the towns of Sinjar, Solar, and Keni. Some were killed, some were taken into captivity, and some were returned to Kojo by ISIL. By the afternoon of August the 3rd, the entire Sinjar region was under the control of ISIL, including Kojo, neighboring village Al-Hatamiyah, and the town of Sinjar, where ISIL fighters destroyed the historic Sayyida Zainab a 1,000-year-old Shia shrine overlooking the city. After the takeover of the region, the Yazidi villages of Kojo and Al-Hatamiyah were surrounded, with no one allowed in nor out. As recounted to UNITAD repeatedly, through witness testimony collected, ISIL demanded that the Yazidis convert from their faith. For the next 10 days, senior ISIL members met repeatedly with the leaders of the two villages, Sheikh Ahmed Jasso of Kojo and Sheikh Hussein Barjas, the Mukhtar of Al-Hatamiyah. They were told to convince their people to convert, or else to leave the area.
On August 9th, I decided not to wait any longer. I told the villagers to each get a bottle of water and 2 pieces of bread. Switch off your cell phones and leave the lights on. At 8 p.m., we started to move.
Rather than remaining at the mercy of ISIL, Sheikh Barjas led nearly the entire village of Al-Hatamiyah, split into 2 groups, on an escape to Sinjar mountain. Testimony and cell data collected by UNITAD investigators allows us to precisely reconstruct the routes taken by the villagers. To the Yazidis, Sinjar mountain is a sacred place, and in those days of early August 2014, people from around the region attempted to get to the mountains on foot in the hopes of reaching safer ground. When ISIL learned that the villagers of Al-Hatamiyah had escaped, they were furious, and they increased pressure on Sheikh Jasso to convince his people to convert. The Quranic injunction of La ikraha fid din, that there is no compulsion in the matter of religion, was utterly defied by this most un-Islamic state. Instead, coercion and duress, force and violence were the tools deployed. On the morning of August the 15th, following the continued refusal of the Yazidis to convert, ISIL fighters descended. Over the course of our investigation, UNITAD has collected extensive testimonial accounts from survivors. Our forensics team has used a range of technologies to document the environment of Kojo village. Here, you see locations of laser scan capture points that were ultimately converted into a high-resolution 3D model. And through the collection of call data records, we can track the call activity in and out of the village. By synthesizing these assets, UNITAD has pieced together the tragic events of August the 15th, beginning at Kojo School, where ISIL had demanded that all the villagers should report.
When I got to the school, it was already almost full, because most people lived closer than I did.
The school was crowded, with hundreds of frightened villagers.
This hallway was full of people.
Some Daesh members came to us and told us to hand over all our belongings, our gold, money, and phones.
According to call data records obtained by UNITAD, phone activity essentially ends as ISIL confiscates the villagers' means of communication. By later filtering out the phone numbers of survivors and victims, the team has been able to identify call activity of suspected perpetrators. Once in the school, ISIL separated the men from the women.
The women were put upstairs and there were Daesh fighters at the bottom of each set of stairs.
Sheikh Ahmed Jasso, the Mukhtar of the village, was being held in the main hall of the school. The women who were being held upstairs could hear the activity through the balcony above.
I heard the Daesh member say to Ahmed Jasso, "If all of you convert to Islam, we will not order you to do anything." Ahmed Jasso said, "If I speak for myself, I will not become Muslim, but let me ask my people." Then all the men said, "We will not become Muslim."
Then Daesh fighters took our men away. We didn't know where they were taking them.
Downstairs, ISIL began to remove the men from the school in small groups.
I thought they were being taken to the Sinjar mountain. When the first two groups were taken, the school was quiet because Daesh didn't allow anyone to speak or say anything. The women and children were upstairs, but I didn't hear their voices. People were in fear and were panicking.
The men were taken in groups to a number of sites around Kojo. Many believed they were being transported to safety, to Mount Sinjar.
When we first got in the truck, we thought we were going towards Sinjar mountain. But when it turned towards here, we started to get scared.
Unknown to them, the men were being collected for mass execution at a number of sites surrounding Kojo village.
Daesh told us to get out of the vehicle and organize ourselves in a single line. We couldn't arrange ourselves in a line as we were panicking and scared, so we held each other's hands. At that moment, all I thought of was my son, because I thought to myself that Daesh would kill our children too. Daesh surrounded us in a circle and were holding PKCs, pistols and AK-47s. In a few minutes, they started shooting at us and we all fell to the ground.
There's the grave. They were shooting from behind until we were all collected there. They lined up and they told us to crouch down like this. That's when they shot us and the planes were flying overhead, and after they stopped shooting, they started killing people over there too.
On August the 15th, hundreds of men, nearly the entire male population of Kojo, were systematically and deliberately murdered. There are 17 mass grave sites in and around Kojo. UNITAD has worked with local authorities and the Yazidi community to identify and excavate all of them. With advanced technology and in close partnership with Iraqi and KRG authorities, UNITAD has ensured that the evidence collected is in line with international standards and incorporated into case files assembled against those responsible. Back at Kojo School on August the 15th, Sheikh Ahmed Jasso was the sole remaining adult male.
After the men were gone, we got down from the second floor to the ground floor. Downstairs, I saw Sheikh Ahmed Jasso with two Daesh members.
I saw that he was speaking with them, and the Mukhtar Ahmed Jasso took off his ring and gave it to them. He wore his grey jacket. They held his hand. He said to them, "I'm giving you my ring. This is the last thing we have. We know what is our fate." Two men took his hands and took him away, and I don't know where they took him.
Then they took Ahmed Jasso, and I heard the sound of shooting.
For the women and children of Kojo, the horrors of August the 15th were merely the beginning. ISIL transported everyone left at Kojo School north to the nearby small village of Solar, at the site of a former technical college that ISIL used as a holding area.
Daesh took us to the Solah Institute. It was around 2 p.m. and we stayed there overnight. On the second day, about 10 o'clock, the Daesh members took the old woman outside of the institute.
My mother saw an excavator outside and that Daesh fighters were preparing for the execution.
UNITAD has confirmed that 82 women, 40 years old or older, and 10 boys were executed in this mass grave next to the Solar Institute, which was finally excavated in November 2020 and their remains collected.
After that, they took us, the younger women and children, to a school in Tel Afar.
From Tel Afar, women and children entered an extensive network of human trafficking, being taken to various holding sites in ISIL-occupied Mosul, back to Tel Afar and surrounding villages, Qasr el-Mirab and Qas el-Q, and eventually being taken to sites as far away as Raqqa in Syria.
I could hear the boys upstairs crying for their mothers. The group of women was in a hall. Each emir came and bought 9 to 10 women. The first one mocked me because I was dirty. I was sold 14 times.
Almost without exception, the women ended up in sexual slavery. The younger unmarried women were taken to Syria in the immediate aftermath of the massacre at Kojo village, but eventually also the married women were sold to ISIL members in Syria. Boys as young as 9 were taken to Daesh training camps and used in suicide operation, assassination plots, or on the battlefield. The gravity of these crimes underlines the imperative that those individuals responsible must be held accountable. UNITAD's diverse collection of evidence has enabled the team to identify key perpetrators of the Kojo massacre and subsequent trafficking of women and children. An ISIL payroll roster extracted from battlefield evidence revealed detailed information such as full names and monthly salaries for a number of suspects. One of the principal perpetrators of the Kojo massacre, a man known as Abu Hamza, appears repeatedly. Based on the synthesis of all material collected, UNITAD's independent evidence-based investigations has now concluded that there is clear and convincing evidence that the crimes committed by ISIL against the Yazidi community constitutes the crime of genocide. Now, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that the evidence collected is put before national courts to prosecute those most responsible. As part of this effort, the team partnered Situ Research to develop a digital evidence presentation platform which will be made available to national authorities. The platform translates the meticulous details of the case brief into a dynamic and accessible repository of evidence that can be presented clearly in court. What you have seen in this video today provides a short demonstration of some of the ways that UNITAD is using new technological methods to bring the crime scene to the courtroom and to deliver accountability. Through close cooperation with the families of victims, Iraqi authorities and NGOs, UNITAD has also recently supported the identification and return of remains of some of those killed in Kojo on the 15th of August 2014. Through our witness protection team, psychosocial support was offered to families present, while UNITAD also assisted in ensuring that burials were conducted in line with religious and cultural norms. This represented a profound moment of reflection for the Yazidi community and a small step towards justice for the victims and the survivors of the Kojo massacre. UNITAD is continuing its work with Iraqi authorities in order to identify remains and support their return to their families for proper and dignified burial. The massacres and subsequent enslavement of the Yazidi population of Kojo represents one of the many egregious and brutal examples of violence inflicted by ISIL on the Iraqi people. But it's important to note that such crimes were not limited to the Yazidi community or just the Sinjar region. The crimes of ISIL have impacted all communities in Iraq, whether Shia, Sunni, Christian, Kakai or Shabak. The investigative priorities of UNITAD will continue to reflect the calls for justice from all of these communities. In doing so, we seek to meet the demands of survivors and the families of victims for individual perpetrators to be held accountable in a court of law, thereby building a basis for lasting peace and reconciliation.